All right, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for your patience. We're so happy to have you as part of our Bill.com Thought Leadership Series. Just a couple of quick housekeeping items. If you have any questions, any technical issues, or you just want to respond, you can use the Q&A chat, which is located there on your dashboard. Today, we are excited to have our partner, LBMC, and with us is Kenneth Sims, Vice President of Business Systems. Take it away, Kenneth.
Thanks, Brandon. I appreciate it, and definitely appreciate the opportunity that Bill.com has given me to talk a little bit about digital transformation. And this will be a little bit different for me. I'm kind of used to having an audience and kind of be able to see your faces, and not going to be able to do that today, but hopefully the information and things we'll talk about today will be of benefit to you and as you run your businesses, and I hope everybody is doing well and staying healthy. I have been, as I was thinking about this presentation today, I just realized that this will be my 34th year in technology. So I've been at this since the mid-'80s, and have certainly, in the 30 years that I've been a consultant and the 4 years that I was a chief operating officer for a small company in the transportation industry, I've certainly spanned many of the things we're going to talk about today in terms of digital transformation and kind of the history of where we've come from a technology standpoint and where we're going into the future. I began my career working on mainframes as a programmer analyst for a large consulting company, and kind of had that large mainframe experience. And then, of course, was part of the business boom and the PC boom in the mid-'80s relative to decentralization or departmentalization of computing resources. And then certainly in the last 5 to 10 years, been part of the technology boom as well as it relates to the internet and several of the different topics we're going to talk about today. So hopefully some of my perspectives and experience in that regard will hopefully be helpful to you today as we talk about digital transformation. I just want to obviously offer a few credits here in terms of the information that I'm pulled together for our presentation today. I certainly have used some of my own experiences, but used some resources from some other companies and some other partners as well to help me in putting this together, and certainly appreciate, again, Bill.com's assistance with this presentation today as well. So one aspect about LBMC Technology Solutions is that we are a full-service technology company. And so this does bring a little bit a perspective with some of the topics we'll talk about today. So my primary responsibilities with LBMC has been with the implementation of financial solutions over the last 18 years, but have been involved from a technology standpoint across the enterprise of technology solutions that we provide, not only financial systems, but customer relationship management systems, document management, some of the cloud-based Microsoft Office type tools like Exchange and Office 365. We also provide managed IT services and network engineering services to our clients, along with IT security and software development. So hopefully all of that's given me a little bit of perspective on some of the things we'll touch base on today. So from an agenda standpoint, it's going to be a pretty simple agenda. We're going to talk first about what is digital transformation, so try to define that a little bit. We'll go into in-depth in that area quite a bit and talk a little bit about the history of where technology has come and why that's important for us to understand that history today. And then of course, we want to translate that pretty quickly into some practical things in the sense of why is digital transformation important to you and your business. And then finally, once we're able to kind of cross those topics, is then how do I begin the digital transformation journey? What are some things I can do to kind of begin that process if you haven't already begun it, or how can I continue to enhance or build upon perhaps a journey you've already begun in that sense? So those will be the three primary topics we'll talk about today. So what is digital transformation? So it's going to be kind of interesting in the sense that I'm really not going to start with technology. I'm going to start with people. And I think it's important when we talk about digital transformation that we understand that it's not just about technology, it's a people thing. And many times I think we forget that. One of the advices that I give to my clients when I work with them is we should never implement technology just for technology's sake. And it certainly takes more than just technology to bring solutions to our businesses that help us change and transform our business. You've probably all seen this diagram to the left of my screen here where it talks about people, process, and technology. And certainly all three of those components are critical. And the most critical piece of that, in my opinion, is certainly people. the more that the kind of interesting dynamic here is the more that technology becomes part of our lives, the more the human dimension really matters and becomes valuable. And certainly part of what we're going to be talking about today is that digital transformation hopefully frees us from redundant and repetitive tasks that we had to work on before to allow us to be more creative and have the space we need to help our companies innovate. Because, see, technology in and of itself does not innovate. People do. Technology, does not interrupt or disrupt any industries. People do. And so it's important to always keep that in mind, that people continue to be our most important asset. What technology does is that it enables and it amplifies the potential that our people have. We're able to focus those individuals on higher value tasks and help our businesses be successful. And obviously, with all the things that we have at our disposal today, the potential of our people is greater than ever for them to contribute to the bottom line. Our potential as individuals, for me and for you, is really influenced by two things. It's influenced by what we know, and it's also influenced by who we're connected with. I grew up in the 60s and 70s, and so our sources of knowledge were kind of limited back then. We certainly had our parents, or I had my parents, as a source of knowledge. And I also had this set of encyclopedias that sat on the bookshelf, and my particular brand was World Book. I don't know what your brand was. Maybe it was Britannica or one of the other brands, but there was a set of encyclopedias that I had at my disposal if I had a question about the world about me. Today, obviously, we have at our fingertips an endless source of knowledge and things that we could have only dreamed of or imagined if we were growing up in the 60s or 70s. That gives us information that helps us to drive our businesses and to learn more about how we can apply those things to what we do. The other thing is that we are obviously connected to so many more people and information than we were previously. And so with all of that at our disposal, then the question is, what's holding us back? What's holding us back from that? And certainly from a people standpoint and from a personal standpoint, the thing that sometimes holds us back relative to digital transformation or technology objectives can be just the essence of change, right? And change is a big word, and it's a word that can be kind of scary to some, and has been scary to me in the past as it relates to that. Our past can really keep us from accepting changes. The older I get in my career, the more likely I don't want to change. And I've seen that in myself. Even most recently, our team has been moving towards more collaborative technologies related to how we run our business as it relates to our projects. And we've been doing a lot with a product from Microsoft called Microsoft Teams. And, my background, is more from a programming standpoint and more linear in my thought. And I'm, the email inbox of Outlook is kind of a more natural process for me personally to collaborate, but it's not really a collaboration tool. And many of our team members who are beginning to use Microsoft Teams, I can just see the efficiency and the productivity that comes from that. But for me personally, it's been difficult for me to change and kind of get used to that. And certainly that's a trivial example of how change can somehow impact our ability to move forward and to transform our businesses through the use of technology. But we've got to be able to, to have the self-awareness about ourselves, about our education, our training, and perhaps even our corporate culture that may keep us from being able to visualize the future and be able to take advantage of technologies that can transform our companies. And not just change, but disruptive change. So I think one of the things we'll see in our presentation today, that the change that's happening all around us is not just, incremental change, but orders of magnitude type transformation and disruption of entire industries that's occurring all around us. And then the question we have to ask then is, for us personally in our own business and what we're trying to accomplish, what can we do perhaps to stay competitive and perhaps disrupt our own industries as it relates to the use of technology to better our company's profitability and ability to compete in the market. Fear is certainly part of the equation and can keep us from accepting or being prepared for change. In fact, we may have come from a corporate culture where, we rewarded those who didn't take a lot of risks that we could count on to never make a mistake. And so we kind of get programmed over time to really not push the boundaries for what may be possible. And so we have to recognize that while our people have tremendous capabilities that we'd like to unleash on our problems that we face and the solutions that we're looking to put in place for our businesses. We also have to understand that those same individuals can have things that would hold them back from being able to accept change. And so we need to kind of recognize both parts of that dynamic. Some lessons learned that I have had over the years as I've thought about digital transformation and helping consult with companies related to implementing technology is that purpose is critically important. As I mentioned before, we don't change just for the sake of change. There has to be a purpose, an objective that we can tie back to our business and to what we're trying to accomplish. So purpose is critically important. We also have to make sure that we understand that our past success can limit our ability to be open and to embrace change. We're going to look at some examples today in our presentation about companies that enjoyed great amount of success, but were not open to embrace change and therefore went by the wayside. And so we have to recognize that. And we also have to believe that mistakes are okay, that we can, in trying to push those boundaries and trying to do what the right thing is, in some cases that we're going to make mistakes, and that's okay. We can't be fearful of that, or it's going to hold us back from perhaps doing the things that will be most impactful to our businesses. Transformative change is coming. It has been here for a while. It continues to happen in our industries, and especially from a technology standpoint, and I'm sure in your own businesses and industries, you see it happening all around you. So we just need to know what we can do about that to become part of that and to stay ahead of that curve. I'm going to have a video just here in a few minutes that I think really speaks to that, kind of get you excited about why we need to, have this conversation today about digital transformation. So if we look at digital transformation itself, it's certainly a buzzword that's been around for several years. I think I've did my first presentation on digital transformation 2 or 3 years ago. It's sometimes for a lot of individuals a fuzzy kind of a thing, and we're going to try to put some definitive kind of things on the table today to help kind of fill in the gaps perhaps of your own understanding of digital transformation. Certainly, as you can see in this definition, digital technologies is certainly the key component here. The question is, what are those digital technologies? And we'll talk a little bit about that today. But I think the last sentence is also very important in the sense that it brings this back to the statement I made earlier about technology, not implementing technology for technology's sake. And that is that it's about identifying how to adapt your business and to drive customer loyalty and really to maintain your competitive edge in the marketplace. And so if it's not about that, then it's about the wrong things, and we need to kind of take a step back. So let's look a little bit about digital, this term digital, and what that means. You may have heard the term digitization. You may have heard the term digitalization, and then we'll talk a little bit about the future. And this slide here kind of gives you an example of this, which I think is meaningful as we think about digital transformation. Digitization was putting roadmaps onto CD-ROMs, right? So I think I even had a computer at one point where I had a map, translation of a physical analog or piece of paper map to a CD-ROM that I could put on my computer, and I could see that same map on my computer. That's basically transferring something from an analog type environment to a digital environment. And certainly that's part of the journey that we've been on over the last 20 or 25 years. Digitalization, on the other hand, begins to, transcend that. And early versions of Google Maps were an example of that, right? In terms of not only providing the digitization of those maps, but providing the ability then to plot my course, right? It's going to tell me how long it's going to take for me to get there and things of that nature. And I can actually visually see my route, on the map. And then certainly they added to that over time, right? With the ability to even view and look at, the location I'm going to and see an actual picture of that site that I'm going to. The future, and as you think about digital transformation, is Waze. And I don't go anywhere today without having Waze on because of the traffic where I live is such that I never know what kind of traffic snarl I'm going to run into. But, Waze takes it to a new level, right? Because it incorporates real-time information, traffic data that's getting from its own user base of individuals using the product to actually give you real-time adjustments to your route in order to allow you to navigate around potential traffic jams. And so you can see, in this simple example, how what we're talking about is not just simply translating digital, analog data to a digital format. It's much more than that. There's other components that are at play that Waze is using in this particular example, and then some examples we'll talk about with some of the other technologies that we're looking at. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to play a video. I found this video when I was preparing for a digital transformation several years ago, and it's really a great video, and I think will help kind of cement, I think, what digital transformation is all about, and begin to talk about and answer the question about why it's important for us to be having this conversation today.
Once upon a time, business as usual was often good enough. No more. Where we are going, good enough is dead. In a world where everything is connected, where everything is equally excellent, where performance is reaching perfection, there's only one space left to innovate in: you. Right now, you are a central point in the raging tornado of change fueled by digitization, mobilization, augmentation, disintermediation, automation. Well, the list goes on. Science fiction is becoming science fact. Think about self-driving cars or computers that can learn and think. The way we work will never be the same. The skills we need will be dramatically different. Winning or losing are now happening faster than ever before. So what's your response? How will you discover new opportunities in one of the most transformational times in human history? Are you driving change, or are you being driven by it? Disruption has become the new normal. With change, it's always gradually, then suddenly, well, things really have stopped happening gradually. This change is exponential. Everything that used to be dumb and disconnected is now wired and intelligent. Cars, cities, ports, farms, even our bodies will be wired with sensors and will talk to each other. These game changers are also combinatorial. They amplify each other, creating a perfect storm of change. Quantum computing fuels big data. The Internet of Things fuels artificial intelligence and deep learning, which fuels robotics. However, anything that cannot be digitized or automated will become extremely valuable. Human-only traits such as creativity, imagination, intuition, emotion, and ethics will be even more important in the future, because machines are very good at simulating, but not at being. Yes, robots and software will do some of our work, but this will allow us to focus on things that cannot be automated. To imagine change squared, you've got to start engaging more with what might be, not just with what is. Immerse yourself in the immediate future, 5 to 7 years out from today. We need to go beyond technology and data to reach human insights and wisdom. Technology represents the how of change, but humans represent the why. The future is about holistic business model. The opportunity is to be liquid, to learn just in time, not just in case, not single improvements, but complete transformations, not individual systems, but new ecosystems. Humanity is where true and lasting value is created. We will engage, relate, and buy things because of the experiences they provide, because of their transformative power. The future doesn't just happen. The future gets happened. The new way to work is to embrace technology, but not to become it. The future is in technology, yet the bigger future lies in transcending it. Let's live and lead from here.
I hope that video was you were impressed with that as I was when I first saw it. It definitely gets you thinking for sure. And there's quite a few things that when I first listened to that kind of stood out to me as that video was going along. And I'm just going to kind of call out some of these things. I don't know what, perhaps you have your own thoughts about things that stood out to you. one of the things that stood out to me was the phrase where he said, "Good enough is dead." And so I think certainly we understand that because technology can kind of level set the playing field, right? So it used to be that I had to be a multi-million-dollar company, maybe even a public company in order to afford or be able to do certain things. And now somebody out of their garage can have the same experience or provide the same experience to the customers that it used to take somebody with a lot more resources to provide. And so excellence can be achieved, more seamlessly and more quickly. Perhaps some of these technologies, it doesn't require a lot of times a lot of investment, perhaps. So just getting by with the status quo is going to leave you behind, because we can no longer just be good enough. We've got to be able to be looking into the future and be transformative about how we think about what we're providing to our customers and how we're providing that to them and how we're running our companies to support those clients. The other thing he mentioned there was disruption is the new normal. I think we've all been saying that statement here for a while in the last 6 months with the pandemic. What is the new normal? And I don't think anybody knows, from a personal standpoint, what that might look like. The same is true for our businesses, and the same is true as it relates to technology, is that disruption is the new normal. And so we have to be prepared to be an active participant and embrace that. It's not going away. Of course, we've talked about change being exponential. They mentioned that. You also notice that he mentioned several things that we talked about earlier relative to human traits of creativity, imagination, and intuition, and emotion and ethics are going to become more valuable. And this kind of supports what we were talking about before about the fact that technology doesn't replace people. It makes those people more important because of what you're able to have them focus on and what they bring to the table. Humans or technology represents the way we do things, but humans represent the why we do it, right? So why are we doing these things? Important to keep those things in mind. The last thing I'll state that I thought was important that we'll kind of come back to a little bit later is that we're not talking about single kind of vertical, changes. We're talking about looking at change across our enterprise of our business. Technology is allowing us today to try to connect our businesses in ways that it's never been connected before. Many times we had kind of vertical or siloed solutions that maybe were really good at what they did, but they really didn't talk to each other in ways that really allowed us to see our business in a complete sense, right? In an enterprise kind of a sense, and was less effective because of that, because I really couldn't see end to end how these things were being impacting each other relative to how I'm running my business. And so I thought that was critical when they said, we're not talking about single improvements, but complete transformations. We're not talking about individual systems, but new ecosystems. And certainly some of the things we'll talk about today and some of the new technologies that are out there kind of have this as part of their makeup, in the sense that they're easily integrated and can work together in ways that were not possible before. So it's probably important for us to take a little bit of a history lesson here and kind of go back to high school history. We all are familiar with the term Industrial Revolution and probably studied that in our history classes and kind of what made that up. And we're certainly not going to try to replace what you may have gone through there. But I think it is important to realize that we are in the midst of what many have considered the fourth industrial revolution. And that some of these other revolutions that occurred were just as significant in their time, obviously, as what we're experiencing now. And I think some of the lessons that were learned during those times of previous industrial revolutions can also apply to what we're experiencing now, and hopefully will prepare us to not maybe repeat some of those same mistakes. I thought it was interesting as I was researching this and putting this presentation together, as you look at the second industrial revolution, and it was really kind of a move from iron to steel. And when you think about steel itself, by itself, you don't really think of that being a technology type. At the time it was technology, but being that much of a game changer. But the reality is before steel came into existence and they had the ability to put, more lightweight, stronger material together other than iron, they couldn't really span the many rivers that we have across the United States of America with iron. You had to have steel and these steel bridges and steel spans. And because of the invention of steel, we were able to basically have, nationwide interstate systems and transportation systems, and that fueled our economy, that fueled the growth as we were able to connect the East to the Midwest to the West of our country, and how significant that was. Another thing that happened during the second industrial revolution was the transition from was the transition from telegraph to telephone. So Western Union, where it got its start, was obviously in telegraph. And there was actually a statement that I had found. There were Western Union executives that made the statement that the telephone was a dead technology because it offered no commercial possibilities. Just one example of how quickly technology can change. We can look at the third industrial revolution that started around the 1950s, and of course, picked up some steam, obviously in the 1980s, as I talked about before. And we think about what happened in that time period. A great example of that is Eastman Kodak. At the time that Kodak was at its peak, 90% of film sales were through Kodak. 85% of camera sales were through Kodak. And we all know kind of what happened with the digital age as it relates to Eastman Kodak, and how they have just fallen off the map, obviously, for the reason not able to really keep up with the technology changes that occurred. So, why is this all relevant? It's relevant because we can see through history, companies that have not, been able to bridge those gaps between these industrial revolutions. You also see that these revolutions, these timelines begin to shrink a little bit. So we went from about 100 years, 110 years to about 80 years. And then, from 1950 to probably the early 80s, another 30 years when we had the PC kind of boom. And then, of course, now from the 1980s to now, another 20 years later, we're talking about the fourth industrial revolution over the last few years. And the digitalization of our place. So you can see these things are happening more rapidly than they ever have before. So what I want to do is kind of unpack a little bit, kind of some technology elements of digital transformation. And some of these were mentioned actually on the video we just watched. And the first one of these is big data. And so you'll hear this term big data quite a bit, and we'll just kind of unpack that a little bit. So big data basically talks about high volume, high velocity, high variety type information. So when I say high variety information, I'm talking about both structured and unstructured data. So we're very comfortable with structured data. We're all kind of deal with that on a daily basis, but we're not quite as comfortable sometimes about unstructured data. But what big data basically means is that there's really no limitations any longer about how much data I can collect. And the systems and the computing resources that are out there to collect that data, not only collect it, but be able to process it and analyze it, and then be able to feed decision-making kind of algorithms and things of that nature are just exponential in terms of what the possibilities are. If we think about it, the sources of data these days are tremendous. We have smart devices on our cars. Our cars are connected to the internet. We have refrigerators that are connected to the internet. There's thermostats that are connected to the internet, and all those data points are feeding information and being consumed in ways that help to drive business and drive technology and drive some of these other components here of cloud and intelligence. Just to give you a little bit of size of scale here, it was estimated by the year 2020, which we're in 2020 now, that the digital universe was going to reach 20 zettabytes. So I don't know if you've ever heard of zettabyte before, but a zettabyte is basically 10 to the 21st power. Another way to think about a zettabyte is that 1 gigabyte can store 16 hours of music. 1 zettabyte can store 2 billion years of music. So we're talking about 40 billion years of music can be stored in what we believe to be the digital universe today. Just shows you the magnitude of the data that's being collected and the data that's available to help feed and fuel some of these technologies that help us to transform our business. The next component here, obviously, is the cloud. We've all heard about the cloud. We participate in the cloud on a daily basis. If you've got a Netflix subscription, you're participating in the cloud. You have a cloud solution. So obviously, cloud is storing and accessing data and programs over the internet. Part of a cloud solutions, especially as it relates to some business software, whether it's financial solutions or customer relationship management solutions or other types of business solutions, is that these software solutions are built in a multi-tenant type way. What multi-tenant means is that it's an architecture where a single instance of software can run on server or many servers, but support multiple customers. And the key component of multi-tenant technology is the fact that vendors who are providing these cloud solutions can support many clients, many customers on a single code base, which allows them to rapidly innovate and release changes and enhancements to their product, taking advantage of new technology much more quickly than we could have ever done in the past. For as an example, today, one of our cloud-based financial solutions, a product called Intact, Sage Intact, has 4 releases a year where they're releasing enhancements and changes to that financial system software on a quarterly basis. Prior to that, in the 18 years I've been, in this business, most of the software vendors may release every 18 months to 2 years enhancements to their software. So you can see just what that technology can bring to your business when you can get on a regular basis technology enhancements and things that will help you run your business more effectively on a more frequent basis. And cloud certainly supports that. It also, cloud computing supports the speed required to provision and procure new computing resources. So while software is certainly part of that, many people use the cloud to as infrastructure as a service, right? They put their computers, their computing resources they need in the cloud. And when you do that, you can provision new computing resources, new servers, new bandwidth in minutes instead of days that it may have taken before with on-premise type hardware. It also allows you to scale your business and scale your resources that you need infinitely, right? Without having to buy large computing or having a large cash outlay for resources you may not use for another 3 or 5 years, because the cloud can scale and grow as you scale. You don't have to buy additional computing resources just that you may need to have in some future time period. And of course, the economics of the cloud are certainly there, and we're going to talk a little bit more about total cost of ownership a little bit later as it relates to solutions. But the economics of you trying to provide your own computing resources and having your own data center, perhaps, there's just no way you can invest in what the cloud is able to offer in that way. You wouldn't be able to spend that much money to get a lot of the same things you get in the cloud. It's much more cost prohibitive to do that for yourself personally than what you could be able to do in the cloud. The last piece, obviously, is intelligence, is where you're taking the big data things we've talked about. You're taking some of the elements of the cloud and those computing resources that we discussed, then you're turning that information into business result, right? It's talking about meaningful, actionable intelligence. You're able then to have systems to derive and produce business results. We're talking about artificial intelligence, right? Some of the things we talked about before. An example of this in the financial system space would be something that, actually going back to the Sage Intact product I was talking about before, is that we're actually, as an Intact, not only an Intact partner, but as an Intact customer, we use Intact in our own business. We're actually part of a beta program that's a real-time audit functionality they're building into their system that learns the types of transactions that a financial system would be going through, or a company in their use of the financial system would be going through. And as it learns your business and it learns the kinds of transactions that you typically would be entering, whenever it kind of sees anomalies in that data, it brings those things to your attention immediately so that you can look at them and audit that on a real-time basis. So not only are technologies like that can be learning over time and be able to make that information visible to you in order to act upon it, changing the technology and changing, the financial executives world, you can imagine how that impacts the traditional CPA firm that has an audit practice and what that might look like for them in the future. So that's just an example of some of the things that are kind of part of that intelligence kind of light bulb there. So a lot of great things about digital transformation. What are some of the elements of that and why these things are important? That's not to say that there over the last few years there's been concerns about that people have stated relative to some of these technologies. So the question is, what are some of those concerns, and are those concerns still valid? And I think they're obviously valid. They're a concern for individuals, but these are things that obviously over the years, since a lot of these technologies have been in place over the last 2 or 3 years, that have been addressed. But there are also things we also need to also keep in mind as we're evaluating technologies to make sure that we're focused on those things, to make sure that those concerns are addressed and we're comfortable with them. I just kind of rated the top 5 based on my own experience and working with clients on things that have been communicated to me as a part of the projects that I've worked on. And of course, one of the biggest concerns is about performance. And that certainly is, can be a concern. If you lived in a world before where the servers that provided you with your computing resources were just down the hall, and you kind of had that comfort that I walk by the room and I can hear the hum of the CPUs, and I could feel the coolness of the air that was coming from that cool space or whatever around those servers, that it kind of gave me a comfort level, right, that I was immediately connected to that. Part of the cloud world that we're living in, and part of the connected world that we're living in, is that not only is data becoming, so great that we don't really need to worry about that anymore, but obviously bandwidth is the same way. I mean, we're getting, just think about the type of gigabit speeds that we can get to our homes today, delivered to our homes, and we're able to support any kind of videos or high performance graphics and all those kind of things we can support that would certainly support a business in their data, maybe driven type world. So again, performance is certainly something that individuals have been concerned about, but certainly technology has gotten to the point where that's becoming a non-issue because of the availability of bandwidth in tremendous amounts. Integration is also sometimes listed as a concern as it relates to digital transformation technologies. Many times when we look at cloud-based solutions, we're looking at what I would call a best-of-breed approach, where you're looking at certain elements of your business and you want to have the best financial system, and you want to have the best customer relationship management system. You may want to have the best operational system, whatever that might be. But you also have this need for those systems to integrate in ways that make your processes more efficient and allow you to accomplish your business goals and service your customers in ways that were not possible before. And so integration is certainly important and can be a concern, but cloud-based technologies have been built in most cases to be very open in the sense of their ability to integrate with each other. And there's a lot of technologies out there to integrate those very easily, where in the past with on-premise solutions, those were sometimes much more painful, they were much more expensive and much harder to deploy. Now those integration points in cloud-based solutions are much more well-defined. The technology to support those are much more well-defined, and they can be less expensive and more timely in terms of how you can integrate those solutions than you could in the past. Of course, as we already mentioned, total cost of ownership is certainly something you always have to consider, and part of the analysis of it making any change in technology should be looking at that. It's obviously important from a business standpoint, and I would never recommend that anyone chooses technology or goes down a path without taking that into account. That being said, in most cases, when we do go through that and we do identify not only all the hard cost, but all the soft cost around some of the business pain we're experiencing with current technology and some of our current systems, that I've very rarely seen a situation where a cloud-based solution, something taking advantage of some of these new technologies, did not result in a great total cost of ownership kind of a story in terms of payback. Typically in no more than 2 to 3 years, and typically less than that, maybe 1 to 2 years, is not uncommon for some of the solutions that we've implemented for clients on that total cost of ownership. Then, of course, compliance can also be a concern for individuals. And early on, 5 or 10 years ago, that may have been more of an issue with some of the the newer cloud-based type solutions, that maybe they weren't compliant for certainly heavily regulated industries. And that certainly has changed as well, as these cloud-based companies are obviously to be competitive and to replace on-premise solutions have had to address those compliance concerns, whatever those might be. You certainly want to make sure that those solutions are compliant and meet whatever regulatory situations you're in, but certainly have addressed those concerns over the year. And then probably the number one thing that people are concerned about is security. And again, as technologies have matured, this has become less and less of an issue or concern for folks, but it can still be a concern. And many vendors, cloud-based vendors, have addressed this even in the sense of where your data resides. You may have certain requirements that you can't have your data reside overseas, let's say, or you want to make sure that there's certain things about that. And vendors have provided some options that allow you to have some say and control over where your data actually resides. I will say this about security in general, is that as an individual company, unless you're just a very large company with a lot of additional resources, being able to provide the level of security that most, if not all, cloud-based, software providers provide, you would not be able to provide that same level of security if you were to try to make those same investments. You just simply couldn't afford that and try to deploy that on a one-off scale, because these software vendors are able to leverage their security models across many, many customers, and they're therefore able to afford and own a much more deeper and more functional security than you'd ever be able to perhaps invest in yourself as an individual company. So again, these are certainly concerns we need to keep in mind and make sure we're looking at as we evaluate solutions, and we're talking to folks that use these solutions when we're doing our due diligence, and make sure these things are addressed, but hopefully are not as much of a concern these days as perhaps they were in years past. So hopefully we kind of answered the question about what is digital transformation. So now what we want to do is kind of move forward about why digital transformation is important. We've kind of touched on some of these kind of things, but I do want to kind of take a little bit different angle at this point, in the sense that the role of the finance leader is changing. And I actually took this excerpt from a white paper that was put together by Mark Linden, who is the CFO of Sage Intacct. And it's actually now executive vice president with Sage after he was promoted from his previous CFO position. It was it was called CFO 3.0. So basically talking about the evolution of the CFO, or the financial leader role. And these are some statistics that he provided based upon some surveys he had done of financial leaders across the United States, is talking about the fact that the financial leader is no longer really being asked to be more of a strategic business counsel to the business, and strategic in how they are helping the business be successful. They really can no longer afford for the financial leader to be focused on the traditional role of simply running the day-to-day business of accounts and looking historically back at things over time, to bring a lot of value to the business. And because of that change in role, it's important, technology can play a role in allowing that CFO or that VP of finance or that controller to have data and information that helps them be more part of that strategic business council, part of that strategic executive team that's having to make decisions for their business, because they do need real-time data. And if you're not able to get real-time data, then that can put you behind your competition. That can cause problems for your business. And so technology is a way to deliver that, because the finance leader is being expected to be able to provide that kind of information so that the business can pivot and turn as needed to stay competitive in their marketplace. In addition, financial leaders are being called not only to, participate strategically, they're also being helped to drive that change, being responsible for driving that change in the organization. And in order to get those kind of changes in the organization, you certainly as a financial leader, have to think about how technology can help me get there. And digitalization of the industry, which is the last bullet there on the bottom, is certainly part of that conversation that the financial leaders have to be concerned about. That's one reason why digital transformation is important. The other question is, can your business not afford to? We talked about, some examples earlier. Kodak was an example. Blockbuster was another example where adoption and adaption must happen quickly. And so the question you have to ask your business is, if I'm not doing something about this, am I behind my competition? Is somebody grabbing my customers? Am I being competitive in the marketplace? Blockbuster had the home DVD market all wrapped up. There was a newcomer that came that was mailing DVDs called Netflix. We talked about that earlier. And actually Netflix proposed to Blockbuster that they become partners together, and that they would take care of the kind of the digital side and the delivery side of Blockbuster's business. And Blockbuster basically said, actually the comment by the CFO was, Netflix business model was a niche business, right? And this was back in 2010 that happened. That Blockbuster actually, as a result, filed for bankruptcy, right? So just within a 10-year span, actually this comment was made back in 2000. In 10 years, Blockbuster was out of business, and now Netflix is almost a $30 billion business. So you really have to take that into account as you consider where your company is and where it's going. We can all kind of speak to this slide here. We've all been part of COVID-19 in 2020. 2020 is going to be a year to remember, and not necessarily, obviously, in a good way. But certainly we can see the changes that have happened all around us in terms of the impact of businesses. Perhaps you're experiencing some of these yourself now. in your own business. It certainly has changed the way we operate our businesses. I work from home. I'm in the office today, but I work from home most days. I have not had as many customer engagements over the last 6 months as I previously did for obvious reasons. I'm engaging differently with my team members, and it definitely impacts the way we think about our future. I have a son who's a minister, and one of the things he mentioned to me was that once this COVID thing kind of happened, the amount of response he had from the church that he attends and the members of that church relative to personal life issues that they were having, whether it was them individually or whether it was their marriages or maybe as a parent, challenges they had with their children or things of that nature, were causing a lot of dysfunction, a lot of pain. A lot of folks were struggling with that. And what he told me was that what he really perceived was not so much that these issues weren't there before. It's just that with all of the stuff that happened with COVID-19, that COVID-19 served as an accelerator, kind of bringing to light things much more quickly than maybe they would have come to light before. They were underlying basically in these family situations or these personal situations, but COVID-19 kind of made it come to the top. And I think we could say the same thing about businesses. We've seen the impact of this on businesses even today. It's fairly obvious when you drive down the street, you can see businesses that have been boarded up, that are no longer in business, whose business model was not able to pivot and change and react to the changes in the market over the last 6 months. You can see this really specifically for me in the restaurant business. You know, restaurants that had a clearly defined technology perhaps that they had implemented relative to takeout and to delivery and to drive up type arrangements, and even their presence from an internet standpoint and from in terms of how you would order food and that whole experience around that, probably had their best months ever in the last 6 months. And those companies that didn't have that kind of figured out technology-wise and have their business kind of orientated to be able to manage in that situation are no longer in business or struggling quite a bit. So we don't know, what's going to be next, right? And I pray and I hope that it's not anything that's going to be of any significance, that especially from a health standpoint. But we don't know what those things are. Next year it could be something other than health-related type issues. It could be something else. The reality is, though, is we have to have our businesses running in such a way that we can pivot and change as the world about us changes, because change is inevitable. It's going to happen. And so we have to be prepared for that. There was a recent Gartner study that talked a little bit about where companies are beginning to focus their budget as a result of COVID-19. And you can see some of the elements here on this slide. Improve process efficiency, enhance customer experience, reduce risk, improve employee efficiency, automate decision-making. So you can see in that far right-hand part of this graph here, the increasing spend, 40 to 35% of those that were interviewed, 30 to 40% are increasing their spend in these key areas because of COVID-19, because they realize the importance of investing in these areas to help their businesses continue to be successful. So the question is, where do you fall on this scale related to your own business? Are you taking advantage of new technologies? Are you taking advantage of being able to transform your business in ways that's going to help you to maintain your competitive edge, but also be able to manage the change curves that are coming in terms of the world that we live in? So this is another slide that talks about some attitudes about technology. So this was from a group called the Small Business Group that did a survey. And you can see here, they asked whether people agreed or disagreed with the following statements. Technology changes are reshaping our industry. Using new technology effectively is key to our company's survival and growth. Technological changes are reshaping our business practice and business model. If you look at that, the top two buckets there represent about 80% of people are responding. Either they strongly agree or agree that these things are shaping their businesses and shaping their industry. If you look to the right there, you can see that only 24% of those companies say they're currently executing on a digital transformation strategy. So 80% of them agree that technology is going to shape their industry, it's going to shape their business, it's going to impact their survival and growth, but yet only 24% are doing anything about it at the moment. So we're going to transition here in a moment and talk a little bit about where do we go from here. So if we understand what digital transformation is all about, and we believe there's value in that to our business, and we believe it's important to our business that we've been talking about, then what do we do about it? And do I need one? Do I need a digital makeover? Am I having issues that maybe could be addressed by digital transformation type technologies? These are a few examples. Of course, this is not comprehensive, but just thought some things that would kind of get you thinking about areas of your business that you may need to think about. So it's probably, I would say 80-90% of the time when I go talk to a new client who's considering making a change for whatever type of software they may be running or whatever kind of business issues or pains they're experiencing, it's not uncommon that these first two bullets are the first things that come to mind and that a client will share with us. And that fact is they have the inability to get information across their business pulled together in a meaningful way that allows them to have the information required to really run their business effectively. And this can mean because it's delayed for some period of time while all this information is gathered, or by the time it's gathered, it's so out of date that they really don't have what they need to make a decision today because what they got was from last month or the last 6 months, and what they need is real-time data. And the other part of that is that in most cases, these first two bullets are being pulled together by many people over a period of time, executing repetitive tasks or every month in order to pull this together, and not really freeing those resources up to really be focused on more high-value areas. So if you're having these kinds of business pains, whether you're not able to get the information you need, or you don't really have the visibility, you feel like you need to make the best business decisions, then you may need a digital makeover. Perhaps your existing solutions really don't support your expansion or growth plans. This can mean that you've got on-premise solutions that have some kind of limitation to your ability to scale those things. It could mean that you don't have the functionality in those systems to support maybe a move to an international market, or it's just the fact that I can't scale my own foundational servers and infrastructure to really meet the growth that I expect to have in the next 3 to 5 years. How do I scale my business more quickly, more efficiently, more cost effectively? Perhaps that's something you need to consider. Perhaps what you would prefer to do, if you find yourself as a business leader and as a finance leader focusing more about the infrastructure of how you provide hardware, a data center, networks, rather than focusing on your core business competencies and what it's going to take for your business to be competitive in the marketplace from an operational standpoint and from a customer experience standpoint, then your focus and time and energy is in the wrong place. And so you need to be thinking about whether you're really spending your time on the right things. And so I would just encourage you to think about that. And are as you look at your day, you look at your week, you look at your month, and if you feel like there's an imbalance there, that could be a sign that you need to be thinking about taking advantage of some of these technologies. We talked about this already, the last bullet there, just being able to change and pivot when things happen in the marketplace, just like we talked about with COVID-19. You need to be able to take advantage of those things more quickly and pivot on that. And cloud-based technologies allow you to do that in many cases very effectively, because they're in many cases easier to implement. You don't have to then wait 2 or 3 months to use the solution because you don't have to put in servers and networks and hardware to support that. You're able to provision those things that we talked about earlier very quickly, and they take advantage of those new technologies. You may be wondering about this last bullet here, and I added it because I think it's an important point for us to remember. The technology you use internally and your customer may use feels old. So what I mean by the technology you use internally, what I'm talking about are your employees, right? The technology that your employees use internally. Why is it important that your employees be on modern, solutions, not only to provide value to your customer and to your business, but also from an employee retention standpoint? As an example, I have companies I've worked with before who had difficulty retaining employees to work on antiquated accounting and financial solutions because it was so painful to work on them, and they were not progressing their career in a way that gave them future opportunities because they're working on such old technology. And so one of the things we have to think about is not only retaining our employees, but attracting employees to work for us. And how do we attract the best people to work with us? We need to think about what technology we're providing them to use as their tools and resources for how they support and lead your business. And on the other hand, if you have systems or technology that you actually provision or your customers make use of, if you're not keeping that software current and modern and taking advantage of enhanced functionality that provides unique user experience for those end users of your own products and services, then that's going to be a negative impact to you in your marketplace. Remember, one of the things that was in that video we looked at earlier, and I think this is true, is that people will work with solutions and work with companies because of the experience that they provide. So we all understand this. I mean, I do a lot on Amazon. I mean, the reason I do a lot on Amazon is because it's easy, convenient, and the experience that I get in ordering things through Amazon and something shows up on my door the next day, in many cases, is an experience that keeps me coming back. If I go to another website or go to another, vendor or supplier, and I have to wait for a month to get whatever I ordered, then that experience, and even the process perhaps of me ordering, is not very convenient. Then it's going to change my perspective about how I may do business with that company. So just something for you to think about. And then lastly, how do I begin the digital transformation journey? So first step, as you consider, where you go from here, and we'll kind of wrap things up, is that it's really important that you evaluate and analyze, what your business goals are. I really think this is number one, and it's not uncommon for us to go talk to clients and they still not really have a clear picture perhaps for themselves about what they really want to accomplish. And it makes it more difficult for me as a provider of consulting services to come in and to help them with that if they really haven't done some of their homework themselves to really come down and what their core kind of things that they're trying to accomplish are. So you need to spend some time figuring out what those critical things to your business that you need to improve are on. Where are the business pains that you currently have? Where are the things you need to be in a year from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now? And get those things kind of figured out prior to figuring out how you then want to use technology. Because as I mentioned before, just putting technology in for technology's sake is never a good idea. So zero in on specific issues and problems or problem areas that can help you set those goals and sustain and grow your company and your market. That's number one. Number two, collaborate and communicate. The other thing that's important to remember, and we've touched on this before, is that when we talk about new solutions, you should never look at those as siloed solutions for a particular function without considering the whole enterprise, how that solution is going to potentially impact your entire business and how you may want to grow and scale that solution and or other solutions you want to add to your system stack to support your entire enterprise. So in order to make that most successful in your company, it's critical that you collaborate with your fellow executives, your fellow team members across your various departments and lines of business, and that you get the whole team kind of buy-in to what you're trying to accomplish. Because in many cases, you're not going to be able to use these technologies to their fullest extent if you're not able to get buy-in and ownership of what you're trying to accomplish across your organization. And ultimately, your goal is to transform your business, which means you're going to need to be touching every part of your business, not only the back office, but the front office and everything in between. So collaborate and communicate. Get the right people in the right seats that can help you that can be champions of what you're trying to accomplish, and that can help you be sponsors and change agents in your company. It's important to look at that from a people standpoint. Third point here is to assess your technology requirements. Do an inventory. What is all the technology that I have in place today? Inventory that. Are these things helping me achieve my business goals, or are these technologies holding me back? And that may help you focus on certain areas of your business to get you going. Think of cloud solutions as your on-ramp to innovation. So certainly just making a foray for one of the areas maybe if you've identified and looking, perhaps your on-premise solution is coming up for renewal, or you've got to do a big upgrade on this on-premise solution, and you're wondering if the investment in a big upgrade is worth it, or should I look at other alternatives that are going to give me more benefit to my business? Those are all kind of triggers in your own business that may lead you to evaluating cloud-based solutions that can help get you moving down this path. This next to last one here I think is very important as well. If you're not already part of a peer group of companies that are similar to you, that you don't compete with in your own market, that you can become a part of and find out how they maybe are successfully executing on digital transformation, that can be very valuable. And then lastly, it's just important that you keep the big picture in mind. And what I mean by that, it's important to remember to set priorities and to make sure that you're understanding that the impact of what you're doing, what its impact is across your enterprise. You want to make sure the systems you put in place are not just put in by themselves, and you're not never thinking about connecting them to anything else. You want to think about them with the end in mind about how this is going to impact my business and how this solution that I implement needs to work and integrate perhaps with other solutions that I have in my technology stack. So always keep the big picture in mind. Don't get too narrow of a focus, not really consider how this is going to impact your entire business. So I think we've about reached the end of our hour here, and I really appreciate your time and attention. And if you have any questions, we'll be leaving this session up for a few minutes here. Please use your Q&A option there that was mentioned earlier to enter your questions, and I'll respond to those questions via email, and certainly be happy to talk to you any further about any questions, or if you're interested in beginning a digital transformation journey, be happy to help you begin that journey, and anything we can do to help you be successful. So thank you very much, and have a great day.